Greetings, friends. It's time for storytelling on DIYaries. This time, I want to talk about my car being stolen, found, and what I discovered and found about the car. This is my car before it was stolen. This is a picture I just had some fun with. If my car only had two hoods and no tail. And here's another one the opposite way. So you can see I have a little fun with the photos and that here and there, but honestly, I just kind of wanted to start off with a little bit of humor, and I want to be able to encourage people. That's really the point of this video, is to encourage people. If your car gets stolen, yeah, it's a kick in the gut, or a punch in the gut, or whatever you want to call it. It feels horrible. If your car was stolen, you know what I'm talking about. If it hasn't, then I just got to tell you, you feel violated. You feel like, it's like somebody came into your house and took something, or somebody decided to burn down your house. Okay, maybe that's a lot worse than having your car stolen, but it really does make you feel horrible that something like that happens. But in my particular case, it didn't turn out that bad. So I just want to encourage people that while, yeah, it's possible that your car ends up in another country or in pieces, it's also possible that you get it back without too much damage. Okay, in my particular case, my car was stolen on April 2nd, 2017. It was apparently found by the police on April 25th. So it was gone for just over 3 weeks. Except it actually, in my particular case, the police called and left a voicemail message because I didn't hear my phone, and I didn't find out about it until 10 days later. That created its own set of problems, but I'm not blaming the police. I'm not blaming the tow yard, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So the car got stolen on the 2nd. I live in a gated complex, meaning that there are entry and exit gates for the driveways. And somebody pulled in to the entrance gate, and a kid, I'm just going to call him a kid for now, came in right behind, carrying a skateboard, walked up the parking lot to the first turn in the parking lot. Basically, the parking lot goes around the building. There's no parking in the center of the building. It goes around the building. So he walked up to that first corner and then walked back and decided on my car. And it only took him about 3 minutes from the time he walked back to my car to the time he pulled out. I have it all on video. I have some security system experience, and I've been helping out the management around here because of that, because there's only so many people that know how to use security systems. They're not that hard to figure out, but I help out. And because I help out, they were willing to let me get to the system to try and find video of my car being taken. And I got that video from multiple angles and took the skills that I've learned from putting things together on YouTube to actually build a video with all the multiple angles so you can see from the point he enters to the point he leaves, and give that to the police. Unfortunately, that video, while it is evidence, didn't really help the situation. But if you do have a security system, I encourage you, go ahead and use that, because you never know. What I've learned with security systems is you can oftentimes, if you've watched enough video on these, you can recognize people by how they walk. And people don't mask that. They don't realize they're being recorded, or they don't care that they're being recorded, and they just walk by. So I provided that to the police. Who knows? Maybe later this kid will steal another car, and they'll get some evidence from that, and they'll tie it back to my car, and maybe there'll be some further developments. But ultimately, on the 25th, they found my car one town over, only literally like 2 or 3 miles away. But he had racked up with his friends, and I'll tell you about that. He'd racked up with his friends probably 100 to 150 miles on the car. Now, the irony is that when he stole the car, I needed to go to the gas station because it had less than a gallon of gas in it. When I got it back, it had a little bit more, not much, but a little bit more gas in it. So he obviously had to go to the gas station, especially if he went 100 miles, and my car only gets 28 miles to the gallon. In the intervening time, I thought, my car's gone. There's no way I'm getting it back. Or, after a week of waiting around and watching the phone and nothing happening, I finally just decided, all right, this isn't going to happen. The car's either in pieces or in another country or whatever. There's no way for me to know. There's no way for me to know that it could literally be only a couple of miles away. I could go driving all over town looking for it, but I realized pretty quickly that was pointless. Even if I found it, how are we going to catch the person that took it? It's better to just let the police do their job. So at that point, I decided, okay, let's get a replacement car. Got a replacement car. Lo and behold, a couple more weeks later, or a few weeks later, I realized that there's a voicemail sitting on my cell phone, and they had left a message saying that they found my car, and that I needed to contact the police department in that city. So I immediately, as soon as I got the voicemail, of course, I called the police department, and they told me, okay, yeah, you need to come down and sign a release form so we can release the car, because ultimately it's not the same police department that I filed a report with that stole the car, or when the car was stolen. So I had to go down and it's essentially the same form. I live in California. It was actually a CHP form. After staring at it for a while, I realized the exact same form, but in this case, they're marking different check boxes saying that the car was recovered. Well, I go down and I get the release form. Now I've got to deal with the tow yard where they stored it. And since it had been at that point 10 days, with 9 days at that point, anyway, it was around 10 days that it had been sitting in the tow yard, unbeknownst to me, actually in my almost in my own old neighborhood, which that one kind of blew my mind, that it was so close, and it was in my old stomping grounds, or right next door to it. I didn't even know there was a tow yard there, because it's really kind of hidden. But I called the tow company, and of course I called them like right before closing on a Saturday night, and they're not going to be open again. They're going to be open for 2 hours on Sunday and not again until Monday. And I'm trying to figure out what to do, and I ask them how much it's going to cost, and they tell me it's $900, and it's going to be another $53 a day for storage. So by Monday it's going to be over $1,000 to get the car out. Well, I'm at that point in a full-blown panic trying to figure out what to do, because I've been effectively unemployed for the last 2 years. Actually, a little more than that. I am an independent programmer, and someday I'll do a video sort of explaining what I do besides these YouTube videos. I've got a good support system around me. They've been helping me out while I've been unemployed, because obviously money has run out by this point. And then here's another $1,000 I got to face down. So my family calmed me down, and we went on Monday morning, despite the fact that it was going to cost another $100, $106. And went down, and it was like, okay, what do we do? Okay, let's take this systematically. I went to the city where it was stolen, and I spoke to an officer there, and he said there's really nothing he can do because it wasn't recovered in this city. But he did recommend that I talk to the watch commander in the other city where it was recovered. So I went to the other city, to their police department, which I didn't know where it was before, but now I do. And I requested the watch commander, and they said, okay, no problem. We'll retrieve him, but he's out in the field. It'll be a little while. So I went and sat down in the lobby and waited, and then he came along, and he was very generous. And I'm not going to mention the cities here because I don't want to create issues. The police departments work really hard, and they have limited resources, and they still manage to keep us safe. Granted, some cities are, in better shape than others, but it's really a question of the ratio of criminals to police officers. And I don't want to go too far into that, but don't blame your city if there's more crime. It's really more criminals and people not really being vigilant and watching for things. If you spot something going on and you call the police while it's happening, they will come. But if it's something that's already happened, it becomes a lower priority. They will come and take a report. But don't blame your city if you've got high crime. And maybe in some cities blame is deserved, but don't just jump on it right there. So anyway, I spoke to the watch commander, and he was pretty much telling me the same thing. There's not a whole lot he can do. And as he explained it to me, a couple of things, and actually, now that I think of it, one of them I'm not going to tell you because I want to kind of help them along those lines. Although if you have questions, feel free to ask below. But the other thing I was going to say was when I spoke to him, I said, is there anything you can do to get these numbers down? Because I've been effectively unemployed for 2 years. I don't have the resources to spend $1,000 to get it off the lot. And I didn't know that I had a voicemail message because, and there is a reason for this, but the phone number didn't say that police department on it. So I had no clue. I get so many junk calls, I thought this was just another junk call. When I finally did listen to the message, this all started. So speaking to him, I said, is there anything you can do to help? And he said, honestly, every time we call the tow yard, and yes, we have a contract with the tow yard because we don't have our own impound lot, they say the same thing. If the customer, or the victim in this case, is not going to pay all the fees, then are you going to cover the difference? The police department. And the answer to that is always going to be no, because, unless you live in a rich neighborhood like Beverly Hills, and I don't even know if they would do it, because it kind of becomes a question of if you do it for one person, you got to do it for everybody. They're not going to pay the difference. So I said, is there any way you can speak to the people at the tow yard, maybe, do something to get the numbers down? And he said, it really doesn't look good. And honestly, as far as the number of days, that's really on you. He's saying me, which I accept. It was on me for not catching that voicemail message. It didn't get lost. It was there. But ultimately, he, after some conversation, and I played him the voicemail message so you could hear, what was said, and it was all done in respect. And he ultimately just said, you know what? All right, give me that report. Hang on a second. And he walked off into another room. And a few minutes later, he came back and he said, all right, they've never done this before, but they've agreed to lower the price. And that just shocked me. But I have learned over the years that ultimately, if you walk into a situation with a positive attitude and show respect and speak respectfully, you can actually get more help than if you walk in with an attitude right off the bat. And even while I was sitting there talking to him or waiting for him to come in, I saw somebody else walk into the police department, and she was having some issues, and I wasn't trying to listen in, but she basically came in and she had an attitude as soon as she walked in. And the person at the desk basically said, look, there's nothing I can do here. All I can do is leave a message for so-and-so to follow up on this, and we'll see what happens. But this police department, in my opinion, bent over backwards to help me, and I very, very much appreciate it. But I don't want to mention the police department because I don't want to cause trouble. So that's the story of how I got to that point, and then I went to the tow yard, and as much as it hurt, paid to get the car out, not knowing what to expect. Went to the tow yard. They will only let in, for insurance reasons, the registered owner of the car. I had family with me, supporting me, but I was the only one that could go on the lot. And we walked back there, and I had to kind of laugh because the guy who actually towed the car and was taking me back on the lot to find it, he's like, okay, it's this number, da-da-da-da-da, and he's looking for the car, and I said, well, it's my car, I'll recognize it. And so I was just kind of blindly following him, and then I realized I can help him out. So I started looking, and I said, oh, right over there, that's it. And he walked over and he confirmed the numbers and he said, okay. So I got a chance to look around at the car, and aside from being really dirty, it looked at first glance like there was no damage to the car. And that was encouraging. That lifted my heart a bit. And then he pointed out there was a flat tire, but that actually was a problem that existed before the car was stolen. I had a slow leak in a tire, and letting it sit there for 10 days, the tire ran out of air. So I said, is there any chance that you could, do you have air available here? Could you pump up the tire so I can get it home? And he said, sure. So again, approaching the situation with a positive attitude and respect, I managed to get that. What was the other? The question was whether it would start, because I'd been having battery issues. Honestly, whoever stole this car really didn't know what the situation was. He just saw a 94 Honda Accord and said, ooh, I can get into that car and I can get it out of the lot and I can go have some fun. So I managed to get the car off the lot, got it home, called all the appropriate agencies, dotted my I's, crossed my T's, made sure everything was covered on the car, and then proceeded to start cleaning it up. And in the process, I realized that they had basically taken everything. I'm not a super neat person. I had a lot of junk sitting on the passenger seat and in the back seat because I'm the only one that drives the car, and I didn't really care. They'd taken everything out of the passenger seat and the back seat and thrown it in the trunk. They didn't throw it away. That just completely shocked me. But then after I thought about it for a while, I realized it's basically some kid that wants to go for what we used to call a joyride. He just took the car and he wanted to go for a ride, and he wanted to have his friends in the car with him. So there's probably fingerprints from everybody. I don't know what information the police collected when they found the car, how thorough of a job they did, but ultimately nobody was arrested for it. So there was nobody near the car when they found it. But all the stuff in the trunk, and it was a total surprise for me, and I started digging through it, and I realized, okay, they took two things from the car that really weren't all that valuable. I had a monopod, which is like a tripod, but just with the one leg, and that was like a $15 Amazon item. And they took that, and I had one of those suction cup mounts where you can put a suction cup on the windshield and hook up your cell phone so you can see it, so it's not sitting on the seat or whatever. Well, that was like a $5 item, and it never completely worked. So they took those two items. It's about $20 worth of stuff. But because apparently they had issues with the battery, they left behind jumper cables. Something I didn't happen to own, and now I do. So, and those, ultimately I realized those could have been stolen from some other car, and that's lost property, but I accept that I have lost property. Someday I'm going to clean up those jumper cables. I'll see if there's anything identifying them. If that's the case, if somebody, wrote their name on it or something, I'll go back to the police department and I'll say, hey, I was cleaning up everything from the car, and, is there any way you can get these back to the proper owner? So, we'll see. Meanwhile, I've cleaned up the car. The plan is ultimately to sell it. And I want to show you what I've done as far as cleaning up the car. So, what did I find? Well, the most obvious one to me, which I spotted when the car was still in the yard, was that somebody had left a soda on the back seat, a plastic bottle, like a 16-ounce soda, and it wasn't perfectly sealed, so while it sat in the tow yard, it leaked, and there was a nice brown spot on the back seat. First thing I did was I cleaned out everything in the car. I pulled that soda. I also found another bottle of like a sports drink. Got rid of that, pulled everything out of the trunk, put it in boxes, dumped it in my apartment just so I could deal with it later, and go through it and figure out what they took, what they didn't take, and proceeded to try and fix the soda stain. And this is me trying to fix the soda stain. I have a chemical I've used before, which I got at a local dollar store. I don't know if you're in California like I am, but we have a chain called the 99-cent stores, or 99-cent only stores, and I don't normally advertise for other people, but that's where you can find this stuff. It's called LA's Totally Awesome. It's a yellow liquid. I have no idea what it is. It could be some horrible chemical made in China that probably not, but it does smell kind of caustic when you spray it. But I've used it before for cleaning things, and some things that just regular surface cleaners won't clean, this stuff will get in and clean it out. And in fact, if you go look on YouTube, you'll find other videos with this stuff, which is pretty much how I discovered it. I found a video of a guy who had actually bought like a 1-gallon bottle of the stuff, and his seats in his car were really, really filthy dirty. And he just took the stuff and poured it on the seat, like with a hose almost, just kind of dumped it on there, and you could watch as the stains just disappeared. It's like the old OxyClean infomercials. Maybe it's something similar. I don't know. But I when I use it, I try to use as little as possible and then get more aggressive as I need to, so I'm not soaking the material. Last thing I want to do is get the back seat sopping wet. But I sprayed it on there and dabbed it off with a towel, and it came off, to my surprise. The first time, most of it came off. I ran it a second time and got most of the rest of it off, and then I just ran my hand along it, and I could see, or I could feel, that there was still a little bit of hardness in there, which I'm guessing is the sugars in the soda that had hardened up the material. But I just sprayed it again and took another shot, and actually even later, I haven't sold the car as I'm talking here, but I had somebody look at the car, and I told them what had happened. Sorry, that was another junk call. I get them all the time. But I was saying I got it off, and I was showing somebody, and I had them run their hand along the seat, and they just couldn't feel it at all. So I successfully got rid of it. What I also found in the car, there was a lot of dirt in the car. I'm guessing the people that got in there, I don't know if they were playing in the dirt or if they were greasy. I don't want to, it's not a racial thing or anything, but it just kind of seemed like some of the people that were in the car had grease on their hands, or some greasy substance, and I found fingerprints here and there, and I basically just used like a cheap knockoff window cleaner and used that to get most of it off. There was also some writing on the dashboard, which I thought I'd get off. I basically kept trying to take stuff off with the window cleaner because it's less toxic and aggressive, and I didn't want to compromise the materials in the car by trying to clean them. I mean, the last thing you want if you're cleaning up is to make something look worse, ultimately. So that didn't work. The window cleaner didn't work on the dashboard, so I had to use the other yellow stuff, and that got it off, so I was happy with that. I also found, interestingly enough, something on the floor in the passenger side in the front that I couldn't quite identify until I figured out on the driver's side there was a cigarette butt, but it wasn't a burned cigarette butt. It was just the filter. And I finally figured out what it was somebody was taking apart cigarettes just to get to the tobacco, and so they dropped one of the butts in the driver's side, and there was a bunch of tobacco on the passenger side. Ultimately, I just vacuumed everything out, took the floor mats out, vacuumed them separately, and it cleaned up quite a bit. That left the trunk where I vacuumed most of it. Actually went to one of those coin-op car washes, and the vacuum ran out just before I finished vacuuming the trunk. So there's a little bit of dirt back there, but it's not too bad. And in fact, there's a removable floorboard that covers the spare tire. I could probably just pull that thing out and just use my hand or a towel or something to get most of the rest of that out. The spare tire seems to be in good shape, like they didn't do anything to that. The only problems remaining with the car really were problems that existed before it was stolen. So I've got issues with the front tires because one of them I hit a pothole and that put a knob in the tire and it loses pressure over time. So every 4 or 5 days I have to go pump the tire back up. On the other side of the other front tire, the driver's side, that one is wearing unevenly, so most likely I need to get a front end alignment on the car, or whoever I sell it to is going to need to basically get a couple of new tires and an alignment. The car leaks oil, but it's got 186,000 miles on it, and I think that's probably pretty typical for a 23-year-old car with that much mileage on it. So overall, the car is now in much better condition than it was. I should say, on the exterior, that it was pretty dirty. It's like they had gone through a dirt path or they went off-roading. I don't know. It didn't feel like they messed up the suspension. So that's pretty good. But I mean, same car wash, I washed the car. And then looking at the car and looking at little spots on the car and this and that, I decided, all right, I've got a cleaning wax, which I've used in the past, and this car has a clear coat on it, but I mean, I think theoretically you're not supposed to have to wax a car with a clear coat. That was the whole point of the clear coat, was to protect the main color finish. But cars of that vintage, the clear coat kind of dissolves and flakes away, so I've been putting wax on it just to protect the finish. And so I waxed the car. And now I think it looks probably much better than it did when it was stolen. And I'm hoping that I can sell it. But ultimately, this whole experience has taught me a few things. When your car gets stolen, yeah, it feels absolutely horrible. You can't count on it coming back. But it is entirely possible that the car will be found. It depends on who stole it and why they stole it. And in this case, I think it was more of a joyride kind of thing than anything else. It wasn't that they stole it for parts. They probably discovered all the little problems with the car and decided it wasn't worth trying to keep it in some way, maybe falsify some records and try and keep the car. And it had my license plates on it, so ultimately when your car gets stolen, you file a report, that plate goes into a database, and at least in my jurisdiction, that database is the national database. So if it's found anywhere in the country, any officer, police, or other agencies, if they see a vehicle sitting in a place that just looks unusual, it doesn't really seem to fit there, then they can run the license plate and see what they can find out. And if it's in the national database, it'll come back as stolen. And at that point, they can seize the car and protect it, which is pretty much what happened in my case. It was another agency, like 1 or 2 cities over, that found it. And thankfully, the people that took it did not destroy the car. So there is some hope. If your car gets stolen, there is always the possibility that you'll be able to recover the car. The thing to watch out for is the tow yards. They are notorious for charging unbelievable fees. I have roadside assistance with my insurance company, so if I ever need to have the car towed, it goes with the insurance policy. So I can get that covered and I'm not paying for it up to a certain number of times. I mean, there are limits on that, but had it been a situation where I needed to get the car towed from where it was stolen to where it was found, it would have been covered and it wouldn't have cost me anything. But the tow yard, they're not a part of that whole system. And so they charged me $200 for a towing fee. And then after a few days, they are legally able to put a lien on the car. I don't know if that's to try and make contact with the owner or what the reasoning is. But they put a lien on the car, so I had to pay for the towing, I had to pay for the lien. Thankfully, I was able to negotiate and explain my situation, and they reduced the storage fees, so I didn't end up paying the $1,000 that they wanted. So approach the situation, despite the fact that you're the victim, approach it with respect and kindness, and you may well be able to recover your car without spending more than its actual value. That said, it's possible. I'm not guaranteeing that if your car got stolen that you're going to get it back at all. But if they find the car and you take the right approach, you might be able to get the car back. In my case, I got a replacement car because I didn't expect it to come back. It did. So dealing with it was a matter of getting it in my possession and then cleaning it up, and now I'm trying to sell it, and hopefully in the next few days that'll be taken care of and I can cancel the insurance on that car, because I insured it just to be protected, just in case anything happens. But also, speaking of insurance, I thought, and probably a lot of other people believe, if your car is really doesn't have a lot of value, then you would think it's probably not worth going for full-blown coverage. I have comprehensive coverage and collision on my newer car. It's not a new car. It's a used car. It's 2004. But I got the full coverage because ultimately, if the car gets stolen, it's parked in the same space as the other one. If it gets stolen, I only have to cover the deductible, and I can get some degree of replacement cost, whatever they figure that car is valued at. And to get the comprehensive coverage, they want you to come down and they take a couple of pictures so they can see the condition of the car before anything happens. The other thing with comprehensive, if there's some natural disaster or something around here, I'm in a carport, so it's probably not going to happen, but if a tree fell on the car, depending on the insurance company, a lot of these different possible situations, your car can be covered, and it'll either be fixed or it'll be replaced, and all you're paying for at that point is the deductible. On top of that, as far as it being stolen, I went out and got a club, and I put the club on the car, and if you look carefully at their documentation, you fill out the card and you register it, and one of those registration cards that you always have to fill out and send something in so that they know that you own that particular serial number of an item. If you fill that out and send it in, then theoretically the people that make the original club, depending on the model you get, will pay up to a certain amount of money to cover your deductible. So with the one I have, their coverage is actually higher than the deductible I chose when I got the comprehensive. So I keep saying in theory, what would happen is the insurance company would pay out all but the deductible. I'd have to pay that out of pocket, but then I could file a claim with the people that make the club, and as long as it was installed properly on the car, and I can somehow prove that or they believe it, then they will pay out the deductible. And so I may have to pay money out of pocket temporarily, but ultimately I get my car replaced for no cost. So hopefully this has encouraged somebody out there, or more than one person. I really just wanted to make this video because to share my experience and hopefully to encourage some people. It's a horrible thing to have to go through, but there is a chance that you might get your car back, or if you had the comprehensive coverage, you might actually be able to get a replacement car. And then if your car does come back, if the old car does come back, then you just deal with the insurance company on that. Maybe they end up buying the car off your hands and you don't have to figure out how to sell it to somebody. So I hope this helped. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.